Some are saying the Browns are a quarterback away, and they're wrong.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road right here at the Locked On Network and also over at Browns Round Table. Today's episode is brought to you by KALSHI for a limited time. Download the KALSHI app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. I got today what to watch for in the Browns' second preseason game against the Bills on Saturday, what we learned from the Browns during their joint practice with the Bills on Thursday, and everyone keeps saying the Browns are a quarterback away. And I say everyone, I mean a handful of people that I've seen say it, but settling the QB is just the beginning of what the Browns need to be quote-unquote close to contending. And that's where I want to start the conversation, because if you're somebody who believes, based on what we've seen so far at camp, that the Browns are a quarterback away, I think it's important to clarify what they're a quarterback away from, if that makes sense. Because listen, on the surface, I understand. As a general statement, I think there's some truth in the idea that if you get the right quarterback here, or you find the right quarterback here, or one of these quarterbacks on the team right now somehow emerges and turns into that guy, that you're very much trending in the right direction. You have a young core here now that you're pretty confident in, between last year's class with Carson Schlesinger and Harold Fannin and Quinshon Judkins. And I feel like I'm missing somebody. Dylan Sampson's part of that group. So you feel like there's Mason Graham. You feel like that's the start of this young core. And then this year's class, you throw in two receivers that have been the stories of camp, the stars of camp. They have truly dominated and been incredible throughout the last couple weeks, and to me cemented themselves the best wide receivers on this team. You throw in Spencer Fano, who each and every single week it seems like is, maybe early on it felt like he was drinking water out of a fire hose and getting kind of acclimated, and going up against Jared Verse was a challenge, and now all of a sudden he's holding his own against Jared Verse every day of practice, and he's figured it out, and he looks like he's going to be a stalwart on this offensive line for years to come. Like, there's a lot to be excited about from a standpoint of the core, the direction they're heading, and all those things, where on the surface it's like, yeah, if you throw a quarterback on here, this team has the makings of being something special. But the reason I push back on saying that they're strictly a quarterback away is because, yes, the quarterback is the most important piece. And that's the case for obviously every team. Every team needs to have a quarterback that brings the entire thing together. But it's not just the quarterback it's not just get a quarterback and then you're off and running, is what I'm trying to say. This team lacks meaningful depth in a number of spots. They're still young and need time to grow and develop even more. Like, that's the stuff that gets lost in a statement like that, of just saying they're a quarterback away. That makes it sound like you're putting the whole thing in the microwave, heating it up, and then it's dinner and it's ready for you to eat as soon as it comes out of the microwave. I think it's going to take more than that for the Browns to kind of get themselves into a place where they're a contending team, or a team that we're talking about with Super Bowl aspirations. And I kind of asked myself the question, like, if the Browns had Josh Allen right now, would they be Super Bowl contenders? And I think on the surface you could say, yeah, but I kind of cap it at like 9 to 10 wins if you had somebody like Josh Allen, just because of some of the other questions that we have about this team. The offensive line, Spencer Fano's looked really good, and they looked really good in their joint practice against the Bills. We'll talk about that some more. But I still think that's a group that's going to take some time to mesh. You might find that not everybody they brought in this offseason is going to be the perfect fit for what the future of the offensive line looks like. Like, that still might be a group that it's a work in progress that you're building. There's depth. There's depth issues at some key spots. Cornerback, defensive line, and now sounds like Alex Wright is maybe going to miss the season with what could be an Achilles injury. So that's not good. like you lack depth there at that position, and you lacked depth before the Alex Wright injury because the Browns were calling around bringing in all these old veteran guys to try out for the defensive end position. So there's lack of depth there. There's lack of depth in the secondary. And this is part of the byproduct of when the offense was such a problem last year in terms of just no real talent to be seen except for a handful of guys. And you knew you kind of had to rebuild that group specifically. When you have to focus so many resources on like just getting one side of the football up to being a competitive group in a respectful unit, you don't have the luxury of using some of your draft capital to then bolster other areas of the roster. And that's, I think, the situation the Browns are in right now. Yes, they addressed the offense this offseason, but they weren't able to then add too much to the secondary because they used a lot of those picks on offense. They weren't able to they did add a linebacker, they did add a safety, but they weren't able to add to the defensive line as much as maybe they would have hoped because they used so many of their picks on offense. They were so far behind the eight ball on offense that it took using those resources to get that group at least up to a respectable level, and now they can start worrying about the depth. And so the way that I kind of look at it is that it's a quarterback away in the sense that if you get a quarterback, then all of a sudden you're on the right track. If you get a quarterback, if you find a quarterback, if somebody from on the team right now emerges as a legitimate starting option for you and a franchise quarterback for you, then all of a sudden, yes, you start cooking with gas a little bit. You're trending in the right direction. You have the most important box checked, and you can start going from there. But the truth is, this Browns team right now, they're a quarterback and a few years of roster building and roster development away from being in that conversation of like a true contender. And that doesn't mean like if they get the quarterback, like let's say Shador turns into the franchise quarterback. Okay. Let's say Deshaun Watson somehow channels the 2020 version of himself and looks like a top 5 quarterback again. Okay. Does that mean that they're ready to contend right now? Does that mean like I don't think so. That doesn't mean like if that happens though, that they won't surprise some people this year and like go out and win 8-9 games and maybe sneak into the playoffs. But do I really consider them a contender yet? No. They're still lacking important aspects of this roster. Teams that win the Super Bowl, you got to have a deep roster because it's rare that a team gets all the way to the Super Bowl without some sort of injury of consequence that could threaten to derail your season or your team. So depth matters. Development for a lot of these young guys matters. I know Casey Concepcion's been balling at camp. I know Denzel Boston's been balling at camp. But once you get into the regular season and guys who are veterans in this league start picking up on your tendencies and start playing you certain ways and all that, like there's going to be some like figuring out that goes on, and then those players will show their greatness by figuring out how to counter those things with things that they have in their skill set. So it's going to be sort of a push and pull. Spencer Fano's going to have plenty of growing pains. Like this roster as a whole needs to age and grow together and to get real world experience, and they need to add depth. So, in summary, I push back on this statement, the overarching statement that the Browns are a quarterback away. I push back on in the sense that just getting a quarterback means this team would absolutely be contending for the playoffs, for the Super Bowl, all that. I don't think that's true. I think it would be the piece that then sets you on the track towards, okay, this can be something special if they keep going about this the right way. But it's a quarterback plus roster building, roster development. And so I think we're talking really like a 2-year process here to get this team at a place where you're like, now I think they could go win the Super Bowl or contend with the best teams in the NFL. And I think that's the trajectory that they're on. Do you agree? Do you disagree? You can let me know. As always, hit me up at Spencito_. You can jump in the comments section here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. But we have plenty more to get to because the Browns did have a joint practice with the Bills on Thursday, and Tom Monken said he felt they belonged. Was he right? What did we learn about this team on Thursday? I'll give you my analysis coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. There are certain flavors that instantly feel like summer. And a lot of people, those classic red, white, and blue freezer pops are right at the top of the list. Sweet cherry, lime, blue raspberry. It's one of those nostalgic summer flavors everybody recognizes. And now 5 Hour Energy is bringing that flavor combination into the new Firework Freeze 5 Hour Energy shot, blending sweet cherry, zesty lime, and electric blue raspberry into one refreshing shot inspired by those iconic summer freezer pops. Ah, freeze pops, freezer pops, the push pops, whatever version you preferred. It all just takes me back to my childhood where we would raid my friends' freezers for those delectable frozen snacks. And this time, or now, 5 Hour Energy shot essentially put all those flavors of the delicious freeze pops into one shot that you can enjoy to get through your day, get through that long drive, whatever you may need a boost for. 5 Hour Energy's newest flavor is here for you. Ignite your taste buds with the flavor of summer. Get a Firework Freeze 5 Hour Energy shot today. For more information, visit 5hourenergy.com. Back out of here, and I got some thoughts on how the Browns joint practice with the Bills went on Thursday. I'll get to those here momentarily, but I do want to quickly remind you about the Everydayer Club, your chance to get Locked On Browns ad-free. Just head to lockedonbrowns.supercast.com. Check out the link in the show notes to learn more. It's a great opportunity to get this show without ads on whatever audio platform you prefer. So, biggest things we learned about the Browns during their joint practice with the Bills, and what was a practice that we had all kind of circled because, listen, this was supposed to be a good test, a good barometer for where this team is at, how they would play against another team in a more controlled setting, what those settings would look like, where are certain rookies in terms of how they attack guys, how much had they learned, what did the quarterbacks look like, of course, and where was the competition sort of at when we got to the end of this thing. And so I think it's worth rehashing some of what we learned. And Todd Monken was pretty adamant that, you know, he was proud of the way his guys played and that he felt like they belonged. And when he says that, I don't think he means like, yeah, we're going to be able to run with the Bills all season long, right? Like they're not going to be competing for Super Bowls at this stage, I don't think. And so it's not that I think he was trying to say that, you know, put them in the Super Bowl conversation, although all coaches will tell their team that they believe in them and all that. That's part of the business. But I think like they understand where they're at. But from a standpoint of like belonging and him using that word specifically, I do think that Thursday showed us, and one of the biggest things we learned about this team is that they are competitive. They are going to compete their asses off. And that's not a surprise given the type of camp that Todd Monken has run throughout the last month or so. And even dating back to the spring, we saw some of the early stages of this. He wants a team that's tough. He wants a team that's physical. He wants a team that is going to grind and treat every rep the same and push the envelope on those things and truly just is going to be is never going to let up and is going to fight for every inch. And that's why he's run more of a rugged practice where you got guys who are, you know, it's been way more competitive than we ever saw during the Kevin Stefanski era. And that played out on the field against another team in the Bills. I said it with Matt Beauvais, my friend from WKBW in Buffalo, on the bonus pod that I dropped on Thursday evening, that I thought the Browns largely held their own throughout the day. I think the Bills kind of pulled away late, specifically because their offense was able to get up and down the field a little bit better and quicker and put up a bunch of touchdowns in certain drills. I don't think the Browns had nearly as many touchdowns. Or I know that they didn't have nearly as many touchdowns. But there were some good sessions. There were some good moments. And that goes for both quarterbacks, by the way. Deshaun made probably the two best throws of the day. He also made the worst throw of the day on that interception. Shedeur had his fair share of good throws. He had a really nice one on a seed to Malachi Corley over the middle of the field that I thought he scored on because he cut it up and raced to the end zone. I think they might have said he was short in the end. But regardless, like, there were some really good moments for this offense, and then there were some inconsistent moments, some of the same problems we've seen. I felt like you saw a group that wasn't going to let down. I think the defense, while they gave up a bunch of chunk plays, and we're going to get to that in a little bit, I do think you saw them competing, and there was some really good work that was seen out there, and that's one of the biggest things for this season, right? Last year, at times, because their offense held them back, the Browns were kind of non-competitive throughout stretches of the season. And so to be more competitive in general is the type of culture Tom Monken wants to build and establish here, and that I think is gonna be an important part of their success this season. I also think that we learned the O-line has a chance to be good. It was the first time we really felt that way about this group because they've been getting dominated by their defensive line throughout camp. I didn't think they had a lot of push, specifically in the run game against the Bears last weekend. And then I thought on Thursday they did a really good job for the most of practice protecting the quarterbacks. And then maybe it took a little bit to get going with the run game, but they found and created some lanes for guys like Dylan Sampson, for guys like Raheem Sanders, even Devon Booth, I think, had a few moments in that practice as well. So there were some good moments for those guys, and the offensive line was certainly the anchor of creating those opportunities in those running lanes and helping the offense kind of move and progress the football. And then off of that, and now I want to see more, but I do think it was a step in the right direction for a group that I had some concerns about coming out of that Bears game. And then off of that, Spencer Fano, he just continues to get better every single day. Like we always talk about, growth isn't always linear, but for him, at least during camp this year, there's been this linear process of him, like, certain parts of his game, you saw the athleticism, but it wasn't always. He was still kind of getting beaten. He had to kind of learn some of the nuances of how to block guys. And then he's gotten better as like knowing what's coming and having counter moves and all those different things. He's getting better each and every single day. And I thought he had a really nice practice against the Bills on Thursday. You always say, like, if you don't notice an offensive lineman, it usually is a good sign. And I didn't notice or feel like I was noticing Spencer Fano being at the root of any issues on the offensive line. If there were issues, I always seemed like it was away from him. So that was awesome to see. I think we also learned, although I think we've known this already, that Casey Concepcion is special. I'll throw Denzel Boston into that as well. Both those guys made some tremendous plays. Casey in particular had two really nice catches from Deshaun Watson. And there was a play he had, I think it was the screen pass he scored on in the red zone session with Shedeur Sanders, where he scored, and I think the camera caught him taking a shot at the Bills defense that they're not very good. And so, like, this is a guy, the reason I started with KC was because this is a guy who has truly, like, talked the talk and walked the walk since he got here. There has not been a single moment that has felt too big for him. Think about it. He goes out last week in his first ever preseason game, first time playing in an NFL game-like setting, and he finds a way to score a touchdown on that jet sweep play where he keeps his balance somehow, his contact balance along the sideline to then stretch the ball and get to the pylon. He caught 3 passes. He returned a punt for 31 yards, and he said he thought he was going to take it back. Like, he oozes confidence in himself, and it comes out on the field. And when you see him as a rookie, still in his first training camp, going out there and, making plays against a Bills defense that has plenty of veterans on it and certainly is thinking Super Bowls, that was impressive. So him and Denzel both just kind of like met the moment every step of the way. Nothing's felt too big for either of them. And that's another reason why I say they're the best 2 receivers in the team, and they've been the stars of camp. I also think we learned that this defense may not be as good as we thought based on how they looked against their own offense. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to, by the time the season rolls around and we get, midway through it, stabilize themselves and be okay. But for as dominant as they've looked throughout camp against their own offense, just absolutely owning the line of scrimmage, getting lots of pressure on the quarterbacks, stuffing a bunch of run plays. And they did a little bit of that in the joint practice period where they were making some plays. But I think the biggest concern I had was just the chunk plays given up. There was a lot of them. I think tight ends accounted for 5 to 6 touchdowns on the day based on what my guy Matt Beauvais said just throughout practice. So guarding or covering tight ends was an issue, it seems. And there was obviously the notable one that everyone was highlighting on the shot to Dalton Kincaid right down the seam where there was a blown coverage of some sort from the Browns. That was something that, like, reminiscent of the Joe Woods defense, right? Like, giving up too many big plays, and they can't have that. They got to clean those things up, which this is the type of setting where it's like, hey, if you give that up now, you learn from it, you fix it. But you got that's the key thing here now is like fixing it before the regular season so that doesn't happen in those moments. But we had kind of wondered how far of a drop off this defense might have or could have without Miles, without Jim Schwartz, with so much change, and they were sort of making it seem like that wasn't going to be an issue. But against the Bills, I think you saw there are some weaknesses, there are some things that they need to work on, and so I'm not saying pound the alarms. It's going to be a disaster at this point, but just something to keep an eye on throughout the rest of the preseason and training camp. This idea that the defense is still kind of figuring themselves out as well. And it's not so clear and obvious that they're going to dominate like we've thought in past years because, there were some chunk plays given up. And I think that's worth noting. So those are some of the biggest things that I think we learned. I didn't talk too much about the quarterbacks in this segment, but we'll get to that next because obviously one of the most important things we're going to be watching on Saturday when the Browns host the Bills for preseason game number 2 is going to be Shedeur Sanders making his first start. Who will be out there with him, and what else am I going to be paying attention to? We'll get to that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Before the season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions. Who wins the division, who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at the end of the season. And on KALSHI, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. Think of it like this. If you've ever traded cattle futures or traded agricultural futures, if you're somebody who lived out west in Montana, first of all, very jealous. That's exactly what KALSHI is. It's the same concept, only, well, you can trade on anything. That applies to sports as well. For example, if you're feeling bold and you think that the Browns have a chance to win more than 6 games this season, that is trading at around 51%, meaning a $100 trade would net you a $186 payout. On KALSHI, you're trading against peers in a live market, so there's no house. Trade the draft pick, the game, and more on KALSHI. Download the KALSHI app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade $10. KALSHI, KALSHI. Trade on anything. You must be 18 or older. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. KALSHI products are not available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. So the biggest things to be watching when the Browns and Bills take the field on Saturday, and I think that list, obviously, it's no secret, starts at the quarterback position. Shedeur Sanders will be making his first start of the preseason this year for Todd Monken, and he'll be doing it largely without most of the first teamers around him. I know that's certainly the subject of some debate that he isn't getting the same treatment as Deshaun, but Todd Monken has said throughout this process that not everything was always going to be fair. He was going to try to make it as fair as possible, and he was giving Shedeur the opportunity to start because he wants to stay true to that the fairness he had kind of promised these guys to duke it out for the starting job. But they weren't always going to have the same circumstances. It was going to be based on, game to game and how we felt. And he made it very clear that some of the veteran guys, some of the older guys on the offense and defense probably won't play in this game because of the work they got in on Thursday with the Bills. But he did mention he expects some of the young guys to play. So with that in mind, I expect Spencer Fano to play. I expect KC and Denzel to maybe play a little bit. And so he'll still have some of those weapons and guys out there with him. It's just not going to be the full arsenal of first-team guys or projected first-team guys at the stage. And I do think that this is an important game for Shedeur in that, listen, I've said it already this week. I think Todd Monken is probably going to name Deshaun Watson his starter on Monday or whatever time next week before that preseason game with the Patriots to wrap things up that'll treat as a final dress rehearsal. That's where the winds seem to sort of be blowing. But this is Shedeur's last chance to put something on tape in this competition and try to give Todd Monken something to think about over the weekend before making that final decision. And I don't think I've said this before as well. Neither guy has been so resoundingly amazing that they've just pulled away in the competition. That goes for Deshaun, that goes for Shedeur. And I think Tom Monken maybe hoped that would happen, but it just hasn't. So I do think there's always room for Todd to be convinced otherwise if you do something special. And so this will matter for Shedeur in terms of that conversation, even though I ultimately think he's going to name Deshaun Watson the starter, and it feels like that's the direction it's heading. He wants to put some good stuff out there. He wants to show that he can do the operational things that maybe have popped up at times for him throughout practice and camp. He wants to show that he's the best fit for this offense, that he's still the guy that's going to push the ball down the field the most, which I wholeheartedly believe he is. And we'll go from there. And that'll sort of set the stage for if he doesn't start, like at some point he's probably going to be out on that field. I like no matter, I think if Deshaun's named the starter, I'm anticipating we see Shedeur at some point, at least at the midway point of the season on. So he's going to play. I feel wholeheartedly, my heart of hearts, I feel like that's going to happen. So I don't know that there has to be, but you want to sort of finish this run in this race strong and prove that you still, are worthy of getting that opportunity at some point and just learn from it. And I think that's what Shedeur is going to try to do. Other things to keep an eye on, I mentioned some of the young guys. I think Casey and Denzel go without saying, but Spencer Fano, I highlighted him last segment in terms of how he handled himself and performed against the Bills. But on top of that, can he keep it up against another set of opponents, another game-like setting? He was really good against the Bears, I thought, as well, and showed some good things. And he's only going to keep getting better the more reps he gets in live game scenarios, the more the bullets are kind of flying around him. So seeing him and how he continues to progress and get better is something I think everybody should be paying attention to. The tight end room is something that everybody should be paying attention to because right now it's Harold Fannin Jr. and kind of feels like the island of misfit toys behind him. Tom Monken even said after practice on Thursday that it is becoming a concern. There's been guys kind of in and out of out of practice. Daquan Wright, who they signed last week, has not been around because he's now trying to do the whole enter the transfer portal and go back to college thing. So I don't know if he's going to be there. Jack Stoll just ended up on the IR. They are truly, we talked about depth at certain areas. They don't have a lot of that at the tight end position right now. And the fact that Todd admitted it was a concern is notable. So can somebody else emerge? Can somebody else sort of pop during these next two preseason games to make you feel like you have somebody there that can contribute in a meaningful way and be a compliment to Harold Fannin Jr.? I think we're still waiting to see that. And then along the lines of depth, I think defensive line, especially at the end, if Alex Wright's injury season ending, somebody else is going to have to step up. And I do expect that they'll probably go out and try to sign somebody because they've already been looking to sign somebody. And, they might also look when roster cutdown day comes and they try to get somebody off waivers, that might be one of the areas they also target, right? Is adding somebody who maybe was an undrafted rookie or some veteran that doesn't get retained and they grab him. So I think they're going to continue to look at the defensive line, but certainly keeping an eye on guys like Julian Okwara, Sam Kamara, and who can play sort of different spots in the D line, and others to see if they, Benton Whitley, to see if they can maybe pop a little bit and give you some extra confidence that maybe there is somebody, some extra help on this roster already. And the same thing goes for the cornerback group. You're not going to see Denzel Ward in this game. He didn't play in the first game. If they're sitting most of the vets in this instance, I don't think they're going to play him in this game at all. And so can a guy like Michael Coates Jr. keep putting up good days? Can some of these other guys in the secondary, Trey Avery, who I think is kind of hot and cold throughout camp. He's had good days, he's had bad days. Can he put together a good day of tape in a game session? So those are some of the big areas I'll be paying attention to. I know it all starts obviously at the quarterback position though, and everybody's going to want to see how Shedeur Sanders performs. If he can make one last case for himself in this competition to be the starter and all that good stuff. And we'll see all that kind of come together. We'll see what all that looks like when they take the field against the Bills tomorrow. And I'll have you covered, of course, with a post-game episode of the pod. So you're going to want to make sure that you hit subscribe. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, wherever you get your podcasts, and at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can like it. You can comment. I love when people comment. I try to jump in. Sometimes I'm argumentative. It's nothing personal. Sometimes I just, you give me a shout out or you say you like the show and I give you a thumbs up and I say appreciate you for listening. Whatever it is, I try to interact with you as much as possible. So comment, like, subscribe. Also, if you never miss an episode, the Everyday Club is built for you. You can get Locked On Browns totally ad-free wherever you get your podcast. It's available to you at lockedonbrowns.supercast.com. Plus, you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs and Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. Preseason game number 2 tomorrow. I will talk to you afterwards. See you then.